Picture holding a penny that slipped off the minting press at a moment when a tiny misstep turned it into a treasure. That single shiny disc might look ordinary at first glance, but for a collector who knows where to look, it's a gateway into stories of manufacturing quirks, shifting metal markets, and the thrill of unearthing something unexpected. When one of these rare 1989 Lincoln cents surfaces at an auction, hushed excitement ripples through the room, and rightfully so. It's hard not to feel a surge of excitement when you lift that smooth edge, spot the gleam in the fields, and realize this penny carries a secret that most chasers will never uncover. As we explore what makes the 1989 Lincoln cent so captivating, keep in mind that each detail, down to the tiniest die clash or doubled ear, can make all the difference between a face value curiosity and a six-figure sensation. The story begins in Philadelphia in 1989, where the U.S. Mint was producing millions of Lincoln cents as Abraham Lincoln marked another year on the obverse. That year, demand for copper surged globally, and the Mint was racing to strike enough coins to satisfy commerce and collectors alike. Running at high speed, some dies developed faint cracks, leading to the so-called cracked die varieties. Those cracks show up as fine spiderweb lines across Lincoln's bust or the date, and coins bearing them were few enough to slip by quality control. Today, any Lincoln cent from 1989 exhibiting a clear web of die cracks becomes a prized find rather than just pocket change. Collectors often trace their passion back to moments of discovery, and the 1989 cracked die pennies offer precisely that, an unexpected treasure hiding in plain sight. When these anomalies first appeared in mail and handling, they struck fear into the Mint's quality assurance team. Yet, the very rarity of those coins, born from a momentary breakdown in a high-volume operation, is what elevates them now. Philadelphia's Mint didn't release a special stamp or mark for these, they simply slipped into circulation, waiting for eagle-eyed enthusiasts to spot the difference. Key identifiers are your best friend when verifying a 1989 secret die crack variety. Look closely at the reverse, just above the date, for a fine hairline that branches like a tree limb. On some coins, the crack might also reach Lincoln's eye or cheek on the obverse, giving his visage an almost ghostly web overlay. Another favorite among specialists is the double die variety, where elements like the word liberty or the motto, "In God We Trust," appear faintly shifted. That doubling manifests as a ghost image just off to the side, visible under 10x magnification. Without a loop, these subtleties will slip past even experienced collectors, so a reliable magnifier or digital microscope is practically mandatory for authentication. As far as rarity goes, these die cracks and doublings appear on only a handful of the tens of millions of cents minted in Philadelphia that year. The scarcity is subtle yet very real. A few hundred graded examples in mint state condition have been recorded by top grading services. Finding one in mint state straight from circulation is next to impossible. The few specimens that have surfaced underwent careful preservation almost immediately after discovery. The market for rare 1989 Lincoln cents has grown dramatically over the last decade. Where an ordinary mint state 1989 cent might fetch $25 or $30, a well-defined cracked die example can climb into the low thousands at auction. One specimen graded MS 65 RD sold for $3,200 in late 2023, setting a new benchmark. Meanwhile, a phenomenal MS 67 RD double die sold for $7,800 shortly afterward, illustrating how a crisp strike and bold doubling can command a steep premium. Buyers at these auctions range from seasoned numismatists to speculative investors tracking copper prices, each eager to secure the most dramatic strikes from a single glance at the die's unintended artwork. Behind those sharp bids lie stories that fuel our community's passion. One collector famously discovered a cracked die 1989 cent in a jar of change meant for donation, narrowly avoiding its passage into the recycling melt by mere days. Another shared how an eBay seller originally listed their find as error penny, rare, then watched the bids climb from a handful of dollars to more than $1,500 in under 48 hours. As these tales circulate, they spark excitement among forum members, motivating others to reinspect penny rolls that they had long dismissed. Rarity often sparks legends, and here the legend is undeniable. a coin unintentionally preserved by fate until someone recognized its worth. As metal prices fluctuate, sometimes collectors will also chase pieces with unexpected lamination errors or off-center strikes, variations that can pop up alongside die cracks. While those are distinct categories, the thrill of finding any error on a common date remains the same. Naturally, the condition of the coin dramatically influences value. In circulated grades like VF30, very fine, even a cracked die might only add $100 to the coin's baseline price. That reflects the wear obscuring the web patterns and doubling. Move up to -58 Australian dollars, about uncirculated, and you'll see values jump into the mid-hundreds, as each crack or doubled line remains crisp but without scratches or edge nicks. Mint state examples, particularly those graded MS65RD or higher, unlock the true stratosphere of this market, where the red copper luster glows like fresh autumn leaves under gallery lighting, and collectors will pit bids against each other to secure the finest state-preserved examples. For those storing these scents, humidity and handling are the enemy. Even the slightest rubbing can flatten a crack line, making authentication tricky. Slabbed coins with tamper-evident holders offer peace of mind, but raw examples found in circulation still stir the greatest thrill. There's an inexplicable joy in realizing that a tiny groove across Lincoln's collar, something most people would never notice, carries the sort of cachet that transforms spare change into a centerpiece of a lifetime's collection. As you pore over rolls or auction listings, remember that each 1989 Lincoln cent with die cracks or doubling is ultimately a story of imperfection and opportunity. That small spiderweb pathway etched by a stressed die is a reminder, even in a mass-produced world, singular marvels can slip into everyday pockets. Whenever you spot one of these rare survivors, it's worth stopping everything else and giving a closer look, because what began as a misstep at the press can end as the crown jewel of someone's numismatic journey. Shifting our focus back in time by a couple of decades, let's examine the 1965 Lincoln cent, a coin that quietly marked a pivotal moment in U.S. minting history and now commands the attention of seasoned collectors. Unlike the everyday pennies that jingled in kitchen jars, some 1965 cents feature oddities that only the most observant eyes catch. The way these rare varieties slipped into circulation reveals a fascinating blend of changing metal compositions, evolving mint protocols, and little misspoken instructions on the production floor. In early 1965, the U.S. Mint was grappling with a soaring copper shortage. Rising metal prices threatened to push the face value of a cent past its bullion cost, prompting the Department of the Treasury to explore alternative materials. Volatile commodity markets meant that scrap copper in the Dayton recycling yards was suddenly worth more than the pennies crowding tills across the country. Faced with the specter of pennies melting for profit, mint officials made the bold decision to shift from a nearly pure copper planchet to a copper-clad zinc core, 95% zinc inside, enveloped by a thin 5% copper shell. This transition not only changed the way pennies looked on the outside but opened the door to striking errors that had never occurred at such scale. Once the first copper-clad zinc planchets arrived at Philadelphia and Denver in mid-1965, press operators needed time to adjust. The new core metal reacted differently under pressure, zinc compressed more easily, while the copper layer tended to separate if the press speed or die lubrication wasn't perfect. In those early weeks, coins emerged with lamination errors, flaky patches where the copper cladding peeled away, revealing a bright silvery zinc underbelly. While most lamination errors were caught and melted down, a modest handful escaped quality control and circulated to unsuspecting hands. Collectors hunting for 1965 lamination errors quickly learned what to look for: mismatched coloration, blotchy silver-gray spots, and areas where the rim seemed jagged or flaky. Under 5 times magnification, you can see the copper layer lifting like an old poster peels from a wall. These aren't subtle anomalies. Some examples look like geological cross-sections, with curled-up copper edges that shimmer under light. Yet because lamination errors often compromise the coin's structural integrity, many surviving examples show edge weakness or corrosion in the exposed zinc, which impacts grading and value. Beyond lamination, a softer press setting in one Denver die produced the most famous 1965 double die variety. On those coins, the date, the word Liberty, and even Lincoln's jawline spring to life with mirrored ghost images, like a double exposure photograph. This error occurred because the die received two separate hub impressions that weren't perfectly aligned. The double date on a clear 1965 D double die brings a thrill to collectors' hearts. What began as a momentary misregistration at the hubbing press has become one of the era's most sought-after treasures. It's vital to note that not every slightly fuzzy date counts as a true double die. Many weakly struck or worn coins can mimic doubling, so authentication demands a trained eye. Genuine 1965 D double dies show a distinct secondary strike projection that sits about a hair's breadth away from the primary image, with crisp separation and no blending. Common indicators include a shadowed loop in the 6 of the date or a second leg on the Y of Liberty. Under strong direct lighting, the doubled elements pop out like stereo layers, revealing the secret that set these cents apart from the millions of standard issues. Given the scale of production, over 6 billion 1965 cents across Philadelphia and Denver, the fact that any major errors escaped is remarkable. Yet only a couple hundred confirmed double die pennies have been slabbed by top grading services. Those that land in mint state with bold, unambiguous doubling command the highest prices. In circulated grades, a tilting sold for a few $100s, while a pristine MS-64 example might push past $3,000. One MS-65 RD 1965 D double die sold for $7,200 at a Florida auction in late 2024, setting a new record. Small wonder that collectors drive halfway across the country to inspect penny rolls at local banks, just in case fortune is waiting in a handful of change. Digging deeper, it's intriguing how these errors shaped collecting strategies. Some enthusiasts dedicate entire folders to 1965 issues, earmarking sections for lamination flaws, double dies, off-center strikes, and even rare die gouges where foreign debris nicked the die. Others track the subtle differences between Denver and Philadelphia strikes, looking for the minute variations in mint mark placement, which can influence grading nuances. In fact, the 1965 double die, no mint mark variety from Philadelphia is so scarce that only a dozen have been authenticated, leading to whispered rumors of a single coin stored in a European private collection. Beyond errors, the general market for copper-clad zinc pennies from 1965 has seen dramatic shifts. Standard circulated specimens, once dismissed as modern common pennies, traded for mere cents apiece in the 1990s. Today, a nice red-brown 1965 roll might fetch $10 in bulk, and uncirculated red rolls command 2 or 3 times that. Collectors prize the original red luster that emerges from the early strikes, noting that later-run coins often appear more brown due to oxidation over the decades. Another intriguing twist in the 1965 narrative involves the struck-through grease variety. During the material transition, some planchets carried leftover lubricant from the mint's cleaning process. When struck, grease on the die surface created ghosted impressions, bits of rotating grease smeared across the coin, leaving matte streaks and missing features. These struck-through grease, STG, coins are especially scarce, as post-production cleanup removed most evidence of the grease. Today, a 1965 STG penny in VF grade can command $80 or more, while an AU example might top $250. Interestingly, a handful of off-center strikes from 1965 show the mint's hastiness, pressed metal that missed the die's full impact, leaving Lincoln's portrait bisected or shifted dramatically. While these are technically different error categories from double dies or lamination, they further underscore the experimental atmosphere of the mint in 1965. Those off-center pieces, especially when the error exceeds 20% of the coin area, carry their own auction pedigree, sometimes crossing the $1,000 threshold if the error is clean and the remaining portrait is well defined. When assessing condition-based value, the story becomes a tale of preservation. Copper-clad zinc pennies scratch and scuff more easily than their solid copper predecessors, so finding an MS-66 or above 1965 cent is akin to discovering a snowflake in a heatwave. As oxidation creeps in, the once bright red copper patina gains darker spots and zones of yellow-brown. A clean MS-65 RD, red, specimen of the standard 1965 cent can command around $150, while a similar brown specimen, BN, is closer to $40, highlighting the premium for brilliant, original surfaces. Every time a dealer lifts a magnifier over a 1965 cent, there's a bridge between past and present. It's a reminder that even in a date so recent that grandparents still remember its minting, mysteries can linger. You don't need to travel to a museum vault to uncover these tales. They might be hiding in the back of your wallet, just waiting for you to slow down, look closely, and appreciate the remarkable journey of a humble penny. Turning the clock back to 1962, another Lincoln cent quietly slipped into circulation bearing subtle quirks that only the most discerning collectors would ever spot. While most eyes skimmed over the familiar profile of America's 16th president, a tiny fraction of these pennies carried stories of die clashes, doubled elements, and planchet flaws that have since turned ordinary change into prized keepsakes. By exploring the nuances of the 1962 Lincoln cent, you'll uncover a chapter of numismatic history marked by meticulous mint practices, unexpected errors, and a market that has steadily rewarded those who know exactly where to look. In 1962, the demand for everyday coinage remained strong as the U.S. economy hummed along, and the Mint's Philadelphia and Denver facilities struck billions of cents without fanfare. Abraham Lincoln's bust, originally designed by Victor David Brenner almost half a century earlier, still graced the obverse, accompanied by the now familiar, "In God We Trust, Liberty, and the Year." The reverse featured wheat ears flanking the denomination, a design that would persist until 1958, though some experimental struck items lingered in early '62 production. At face value, these pennies served commerce, but they also carried potential anomalies, tiny quirks born of high-speed presses, die wear, and human oversight. One of the most captivating varieties among 1962 cents is the double die obverse from the Philadelphia Mint. Unlike the bolder double dies of the 1950s or the dramatic hubbing errors in later decades, the 1962 double die often manifests as a subtle doubling in the date and lettering. Under direct light, the 1 in 1962 can show a faint secondary line just to its right, and the letters in God We Trust, may reveal a whisper of duplication. This faintness is a double-edged sword. While it lends scarcity to coins with clear doubling, it also demands a practiced eye to confirm authenticity and rule out false positives caused by die deterioration or post-mint damage. Identifying a genuine 1962 double die requires more than casual inspection. Collectors often rely on a 5 times to 10 times loop, angled lighting, and reference photographs. Key telltale signs include a crisp, unblended secondary image that maintains consistent spacing from the primary design, as opposed to the smudged or erratic impressions seen on weakly struck or damaged coins. In some exceptional specimens, doubling extends across Lincoln's cheek or the rim above his head, offering a more dramatic example that jumps out even to the unaided eye. Yet among the tens of millions of Philadelphia cents struck that year, only a few dozen double dies have been slab certified in uncirculated grades, making each authenticated piece a notable find. If double dies represent one corner of the 1962 era landscape, die clashes occupy another. Die clashes occur when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them, transferring faint elements of one design onto the other. On some 1962 cents, you might glimpse an outline of the wheat ears softly etched above Lincoln's shoulder or the faint shadow of Lincoln's profile mirrored in the reverse fields, ghostly afterimages that reveal a momentary synchronization mishap on the press. While die clashes are not exclusive to 1962, the relative scarcity of well-preserved clash specimens makes them highly desirable, particularly when the transferred details are crisp enough to display recognizable features rather than vague smudges. Beyond doubling and clashes, planchet flaws also turn heads. The circulating planchets of 1962 were part of a robust supply drawn from blister-packed coils and loose accumulations. Occasionally, small inclusions of foreign metal or obtrusive grease spots produced planchet blemishes or struck-through grease errors. These manifest as dark, matte patches where the striking metal failed to bond correctly, leaving faint silhouettes or streaks across Lincoln's profile. Collectors prize these anomalies not only for their rarity but for the insight they provide into the mint's production environment, where human error and mechanical imperfections briefly intersected before being corrected. Given the wide range of possible errors, assembling a focused collection of 1962 cents can feel like detective work. Some enthusiasts concentrate solely on double dies, securing both the more common faint varieties and relentlessly hunting for any bold specimens. Others embrace a broader approach, soliciting coins with clash marks, broad strikes, lamination flaws, and planchet laminations in a dedicated folder or specialized album. Auction catalogs often list multiple error types together, offering keen-eyed bidders the chance to acquire a suite of irregularities from a single estate find or advanced consignor. Turning to market value, the 1962 double die obverse in circulated grades can command anywhere from $200 for a modest VF20 piece up to $600 or more for a negative $55 example with distinct, evenly struck doubling. As specimens improve in grade and doubling intensity, premiums rise sharply. MS-63 examples often fetch between $1,200 and $2,000, while a flawless MS-65 with bold doubling can break the $5,000 threshold in high-profile auction settings. One standout MS-66 example sold for $8,750 in early 2025, highlighting the premium placed on flawless preservation and eye appeal. Collectors have noted that the most valuable double dies display consistent doubling across multiple design elements, such as letter particles in addition to the date, rather than isolated date doubling. Die clash varieties follow a similar trajectory. Faint, partial clashes in lower grades might trade for $100 to $250, while a fully struck conflict imprint where wheat ear tips sit above Lincoln's bust in a clear mirror image can easily rise into the low thousands, particularly in AU or mint state. Auction records show a remarkable sale of a die clash specimen in MS-64 for $3,600, a strong indicator that collectors prize the clarity and completeness of the clash signature above sheer grade. The planchet error coins, especially those with extensive struck-through grease or visible laminations, occupy a niche submarket where scarcity and visual intrigue intersect. A pronounced grease streak in VF30 can start around $75, but in higher grades, where the error shows no additional contact marks, values may climb over $400. Stories of discovery pepper the collecting community, drawing newcomers into the fold. One noteworthy find occurred when a bank teller in the Midwest noticed an unusual gray spot on a 1962 penny she received as payment. Curious, she set it aside. Months later, a colleague authenticated it as a grease-struck planchet error that sold for $1,100. Elsewhere, a high-grade double die turned up in a paper roll purportedly untouched for decades, inspiring collectors to rethink the notion that rare errors couldn't survive standard circulation. These real-world tales fuel the excitement, reminding seasoned collectors that even in an era defined by mass production, surprises still await those who look closely. As our journey through 3 decades of Lincoln cents draws to a close, remember that rarity doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it hides in a faint line beside a date, a ghostly impression above a portrait, or a fleeting streak of grease. Whether you hunt 1989 cracked dies, 1965 doubled cores, or 1962 faint hub errors, the hunt itself enriches your appreciation for the coinage we handle every day. So the next time a penny crosses your palm, take a breath, flip it once more, and listen closely to the silent stories it might be trying to tell.